Some things stay with us long after we understand what they were for. An old key can sit in a pocket for years, carried from one place to another, even when the lock it once opened is no longer part of our lives. At first, there is nothing strange about keeping it. The key mattered once. Perhaps it opened somewhere you needed to enter, or somewhere you were afraid to lose. Perhaps there was a time when reaching into your pocket and finding it there meant that something was still yours. So you kept it, not because you made a decision to carry it forever. You simply never made the decision to put it down. And that is how many things remain with us, not through intention, but through repetition. Eventually, you stop noticing the weight. You reach into the same pocket and feel the same familiar shape. It becomes part of what you carry, without asking whether you still need it. People do this with more than objects. We carry old expectations, old responsibilities, promises made by versions of ourselves who no longer exist. We carry ways of protecting ourselves that once made perfect sense. We carry relationships in our minds long after the relationship itself has changed. Sometimes we even carry an old definition of who we are, because there was a time when we needed that definition to survive. The strange thing is that none of this feels like carrying. It simply feels normal. When something has been with us for a long time, we tend to assume its presence means it still belongs. If you have always been the person who takes care of everyone, you continue doing it even after everyone has learned to take care of themselves. If you spent years trying to prove that you were capable, you may continue proving it long after no one is questioning you. If someone once taught you that love had to be earned, you may keep working for affection even when nobody asked you to. And if a certain dream once gave your life direction, you may keep chasing it even after you quietly stopped wanting the life attached to it. We rarely stop and ask why. The key is still in the pocket, so we assume there must still be something it opens. Sometimes we even return to the old door. Not literally, of course. We return to old conversations in our heads. We imagine what we should have said. We revisit decisions and wonder what would have happened if we had chosen differently. We check on people we no longer speak to. We measure ourselves against goals we created years ago. We stand in front of something from the past and reach for the same familiar key, because part of us believes that if we can make it work one more time, perhaps everything that happened before will finally make sense. But sometimes the lock has changed. Sometimes the room behind it has changed. And sometimes, without realizing it, so have we. Imagine someone who spent most of their 20s trying to build a particular career. They worked late, sacrificed weekends, ignored other interests, and became very good at what they did. Years later, the career is still there. The salary may even be better, but something inside them has changed. They no longer want what they once wanted. Still, walking away feels almost impossible, not because the job is wonderful, but because leaving would force them to ask what all those years were for. So they keep carrying the key, or consider the person who learned very early to be the strong one in the family. They became useful before they learned how to need anything themselves. Everyone called when there was a problem. Everyone trusted them to stay calm. That role may have protected them once. It may even have given them a place in the family. But years later, they still struggle to tell anyone when they are tired. The situation changed. The key did not. There are people who do this in relationships too. Someone hurts them, so they learn to watch carefully. They learn not to trust too quickly. They learn how to notice changes in tone, distance, silence, and small signs that something may be wrong. At one point, that vigilance protected them. Then they meet someone different, someone who is not playing the old game, yet the old key remains in their hand. They still search for danger, because there was once a door where danger was real. We also carry promises that no one remembers asking us to keep. Perhaps you once told yourself that you would become successful enough to make someone proud. Perhaps you promised you would never depend on anyone again. Perhaps you decided that nobody would ever see you fail twice. Those promises can become surprisingly heavy, not because they are always wrong, but because they were made under circumstances that may no longer exist. A promise made by a frightened 20-year-old can quietly control a 40-year-old life. A lesson learned from one painful relationship can enter every relationship that follows. A survival strategy can become a personality, and because it once helped us, questioning it can feel almost disloyal. This is where the key becomes interesting, because there is nothing wrong with the key. It worked. That matters. It opened something once. Perhaps it gave you safety. Perhaps it gave you belonging. Perhaps it gave you direction when you had none. The mistake is not that you carried it. The mistake would be assuming that because something once saved you, it must remain useful forever. You bring the key toward the lock again. The movement is familiar. Your hand remembers what to do. But this time, before the key even enters, you notice something you have avoided for years. It no longer fits. There is a particular kind of sadness in realizing that something still matters to you, even though it no longer belongs in your life. Nothing needs to be wrong with it. Nobody needs to be the villain. The key can still be beautiful. The memories can still be real. What it gave you can still matter, and it can still be finished. Those truths are allowed to exist together. Perhaps this is why putting something down can feel harder than losing it. Loss happens to us. Putting something down asks us to participate. It asks us to admit that we understand what has changed. Look at the key resting in the hand. It is small. It is not forcing the fingers to close around it. It has no power of its own, and yet it can feel impossibly heavy because the weight was never in the metal. The weight is in what carrying it allows us not to admit. As long as you keep the key, some part of you can imagine that the old door still matters. Maybe one day you will return. Maybe one day they will understand. Maybe one day you will become the person you thought you were supposed to become. Maybe one day the old dream will feel right again. The key keeps possibility alive, even when the possibility itself has quietly disappeared. And sometimes that is exactly why we keep carrying it. Not because we still want what is behind the door, but because putting the key down would mean admitting that there is nothing left for us to unlock. That can be difficult to accept, because endings are not always events. Sometimes nothing ends on a particular day. A friendship simply becomes quieter. A dream gradually stops exciting you. A place that once felt like home begins to feel like somewhere you used to live. A version of yourself becomes harder to recognize. There is no ceremony, no final conversation, no clear moment when someone takes the key from your hand and tells you that its purpose is over, so you continue carrying it, waiting for certainty that may never arrive. But perhaps the deeper question is not whether the key still works. Perhaps it is whether you still need the door it once opened. Those are not the same question, We can spend years trying to repair an old key without noticing that we no longer want to enter the room. We can spend years trying to recover a relationship without asking whether we actually want the relationship back, or simply want proof that losing it did not mean we were unlovable. We can chase an old ambition not because we still desire it, but because abandoning it feels like admitting that our younger self was wrong. We can keep being strong because we do not know who we would be if we finally allowed someone else to help. The key remains useful in our imagination because it protects us from a more uncomfortable question. Who are we without the thing we have spent so long trying to unlock? Knowing this does not make the hand open. Human beings are rarely that simple. You can understand that something is finished and still miss it. You can know a relationship was wrong for you and still remember what was beautiful about it. You can know that an old dream no longer fits and still grieve the person who once believed in it. You can recognize that a survival strategy has become unnecessary and still reach for it when you are afraid. Understanding does not immediately erase attachment. Sometimes it only changes the way you hold it. The hand lowers toward the table. The key touches the wood. The fingers remain there for a moment. Nothing dramatic happens. No door opens. No new life appears. The key is simply no longer being carried. And perhaps that distinction matters. Putting something down does not mean pretending it never mattered. It does not erase the door it once opened. It does not make the years wasted. The key can have been necessary then and unnecessary now. Something can have saved you once without deserving to shape the rest of your life. Perhaps maturity is not learning to regret everything we outgrow. Perhaps it is learning that usefulness has a season. Some things arrive because we need them. Some stay because we become accustomed to their weight. And sometimes we only notice the difference when our hand finally becomes empty. The key is still there. You have not thrown it away. You have not forgotten what it opened. And perhaps tomorrow you will pick it up again. That would be human too. But tonight, for a moment, it can remain on the table. Not rejected, not destroyed, simply seen for what it is. Something that once belonged in your hand. Maybe the hardest thing to admit was never that the key stopped working. Maybe it was realizing that you no longer need the door it once opened. And perhaps putting it down does not mean the past meant nothing. Perhaps it only means you finally noticed how long you had been carrying it